There is a difference between a midget and a dwarf, though.
Yeah, like a foot, isn't it? Like
Dwarfs are,
No.
Dwarfs aren't proportional.
Dwarfs aren't proportional, so their arms and legs are bigger than their torso.
Oh,
It's
okay.
weird.
I thought it was like a level of height.
No.
that defined it. See,
No.
I don't know. That's probably why I shouldn't really talk to them.
No. Hi guys, welcome to the Think Tank podcast. This is our second episode, and it's going to be over political correctness, which is, something really fun. So we've got myself, Caitlin Peasy, we've got Michael Zambito,
What's up?
Grant Cole,
Yo.
and Evan Warner. The dictionary defines political correctness as the avoidance, often considered as taken to extremes, of forms of expression or action that are perceived to exclude, marginalize, or insult groups of people who are socially disadvantaged or discriminated against. Okay, so what do we think? What do we think about political correctness? Like, just general opinions.
Alright.
I have a super pretentious answer. So.
All right, let me
Go
hear
ahead.
the pretentiousness. I love it.
So I don't know if you guys like watch anything about philosophy, read anything about philosophy.
I love
do
philosophy,
because
dog.
I'm a nerd.
There.
Okay, so I was
One of the words, gosh
so
darn.
there's this Czech philosopher named Slavoj Žižek who talks about a lot of things with culture, and one of the things he talks about with political correctness is that basically it's not needed, it's useless, mainly because political correctness, and this is something that I definitely agree with, political correctness doesn't actually fix the problem of racism or try to change the hearts and minds of the racist. It's just like a self-disciplinary mechanism that we induce into ourselves so we don't upset society at large, otherwise known as the big other.
I really like that, and here's what I have to play onto this. That's why it's not called correctness. It's called political correctness, because these are leaders of lots of people, all right? And usually it's been referred to most recently in our presidential election. That is someone who's leading a country, not only a country, but the world's leading power, arguably, even Russia has agreed that, of 300 million people. So while political correctness on a one-to-one bias or even on like at school a teacher or whatnot isn't necessary, doesn't mean that it doesn't serve a purpose, because unfortunately people will rally behind what can be a mistake or a coincidence or whatnot. Like, your words have to be carefully chosen as a politician. Otherwise things can be taken out of context or misconstrued. And I feel like that's where political correctness comes into play. Do I think people should be forced to say one thing over another? Does it really matter if I call them a little person or a midget? Not in my opinion. But
What do they prefer? I don't remember.
little person, apparently,
Little person,
as
according
far as
to
I
the-
know. But if I say little person, I think, oh, like a little 5-year-old. He's a little person.
I don't think
Midget, I know what we're talking about. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Anyway,
I don't
so
know.
what I'm hearing from Evan is it's stupid, don't do it. And what I'm hearing from Michael is it's only stupid if it's in small situations. But if you're the president of the United States, you should probably be politically
To an
correct.
extent.
Right.
It's one of those things where, like, you don't need political correctness if you're just respectful. Like, Eskimos don't like to be called Eskimos, so don't call them Eskimos. Like, that's not politically correct, that's just being polite. Like,
I agree.
Whenever there's a person that's older than you and you're trying to get a job, you don't walk into an interview and say, "Hey, old man, how you doing?" You say, "Hello, sir." You know, it's not, I don't think it's necessarily political correctness. Everybody just needs to be polite and nice, not, because,
In a world full of hate.
yeah.
See, that's the thing, though. Sometimes, I don't know. The unfortunate thing with wanting everyone to be polite and nice is it's simply impossible. And then there are people out there who, guess what, being polite and nice doesn't really get the message across.
I know.
So, and that's, I feel like, one of the biggest struggles, especially for countries who claim to be first world and, leaders of the democratic free world or whatnot, is how to address a situation where diplomacy doesn't necessarily work.
When I argue that political correctness is not needed, what I'm simply saying is that, like, I'm not trying to say that we don't, Like I think that political correctness is not needed just because for the last 10,000 years that humans have been on this earth, we've had the fundamental. Every society has proven to have this the golden rule, which is treat others the way you want to be treated, and that's the way I feel how things should be. We don't need
I like how
political
you say
correctness.
that, but for the last 10,000 years, only up to 200 years ago, did we finally eliminate slaves. And even in other countries, to this day, there are still classes that are considered beneath other people in other countries. So you can't say that society's been fine without it, since even to this day.
Yeah, but it's not like political correctness would solve the problem of slavery or any of the systemic issues that you're talking about. It's just a self-disciplinary
No, I'm saying
method.
when you say we don't need political correctness because you should treat people how you want to be treated. I'm saying that doesn't work because of slavery and things like that.
Well,
Right.
You think slave masters are treating the slaves how they want to be treated?
I
No.
mean-
But if you add
Not.
political correctness into that equation, what does it change? It just makes the slave master nicer to the slaves. It doesn't change
Well, I feel
slavery in the first
We
place.
could go back to, I think it's King Tut, eye for an eye. Not King
Hammurabi's
Tut,
Code?
yeah, Hammurabi's Code.
Yeah.
Like,
We're about
back
to be
to,
like, you're a
yeah, fact
like,
check me
Right.
there.
I don't know.
I think what you're saying with like it hasn't been a thing is because political correctness, we haven't had a need for it because people weren't equal.
Yeah.
You know what I
well,
mean?
all right. What I'm going to say on
And
this
people
one-
aren't equal now, but we're getting closer
Alright, so
to
actually, all right. Did you guys see that video where it was like a bunch of people, and then they were at
How
like there was,
privileged you
they
are?
all start on the same line, and then
Yeah.
it's like, all right, if you were not afraid to show your love in public, take a step forward, and whatnot, and it showed that. So to that extent, I mean, like, you know, you can say all men are created equal, they're not. You're born into your situation, and maybe if you're poor, yeah, you can escape that. But if you're born African American in a society of primarily dominated whites who are also subconsciously racist, because we don't realize it, but there are certain things and there are certain like keys and triggers that do make us like not treat them equal. That's why we're still having a problem with police brutality, and we're still having a problem with race equality, and now gender equality is coming back to the front lines again. These are problems where, yeah, they won a minor victory, and then we're like, oh, okay, they're good. Like when we freed the slaves, oh, yeah, they have freedom now, except they didn't get like the ability to actually vote until the 1960s, over 100 years later. So, and here it comes again, is women without equal pay. It's like we just now, even though we're a country that separates state from religion, are allowing gay marriage. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
The only opponent was religion, but we're supposed to be, as a country, separated from that.
Right.
I agree with the sentiment. However, nobody has ever provided us like a definite reason, a definite thing that political correctness does to solve these issues. Nobody has
I agree
ever
with that.
provided me an answer onto how political correctness solved these things.
It doesn't really.
It doesn't
these
solve
issues.
anything. It's
What it does, though, is it makes you more mindful of them.
yeah.
But here's the question: a racist can be politically correct. A racist can be politically correct for their job.
All right, well-
It's not about the mindfulness. It's just that they're trying to be politically correct because society expects them to, and that's how they have to live in this society.
Well, then in the end, isn't that sort of kind of ruling out? Like, if they can't expect racism wherever they want, then that's a win for our society, as far as I'm concerned.
But
That's not
There-
the
there's
heart of
a-
the problem. It doesn't
I
get rid of
understand, I'm
racism.
just
I
saying-
get the heart of
but
the
there's
problem, but I
another
think
issue
it might
in this.
help push us in the right direction.
That's what I'm
But there's
saying.
another issue in this, in that I think that free speech should always be allowed. No matter what you have to say, no matter what you want to say, you should have the right to say it.
So
no
then my
matter
question
what.
about this is the fact that, this is just because I've been there recently, Germany doesn't allow anything close to Nazi rhetoric, but it's allowed in America. How do you feel about that?
I don't.
You think
I-
they should be
I think-
allowed
I-
to vocalize?
I
their-
think that the German people obviously have a different constitution than us, and that's how they're allowed to do these types of things. But I as an American, as somebody that has been given the right to free speech, no matter where we are, even though that's not necessarily true always, we should always have the right to say whatever the hell we want.
You know what, and I love to agree with that, but my thing on this is our country fought for our freedom, right? And the reason why we wanted freedom of speech was not so people could spout hate, but so that we could speak up against hate, so we could speak up against indignities that were happening to people, and anyone who chose to speak up would be silenced. That's the whole part of allowing people to have freedom of speech, is to speak out against hate, to speak out against persecution and ridicule.
Right.
But what is freedom of speech when that speech is censored? Because what you're saying is you should have the right to free speech as long as it follows these strict guidelines. That's just
I don't think
censoring
asking
free speech.
Look,
I
all right,
think
what you
what-
say in your household is beyond me. I really don't care about that. But if you're going to get online or if you're going to get in front of a crowd, I don't think that you should be allowed to persecute or judge a group based off of silly things such as skin color or religious belief.
Yeah, and I think kind of what Mike's getting at, you can tell me if you're wrong, is that it's one of those situations where free speech is definitely defined by the majority in a sort of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few standpoint. So, like, as of right now, our culture is no racism, no neo-Nazis, none of that. And in my opinion, that's fine, because that stuff is bad. But if somebody walks around saying cats are okay and the government says, no, you can't say that, then that's sort of the line that I
And
draw.
along with this, hold up, and another thing to back this up, it's the same reason why you shouldn't yell bomb at an airport or fire in the movies.
Okay, but what Grant just said
Or gun at school.
actually
That's a good
I
one.
think is a main point of my argument, which is how do you make sure that because free speech by what Grant just said, what you're saying is that the majority decides everything. Well, what happens if the majority decides we can't speak out a genocide that's happening on our soil? What happens if the majority decides we can't speak out about racism?
I love
like,
it.
like the
Hold
fact
up.
of the
No,
fact of the matter is
I want to say this with that. With that is I want to say, what do you think happened during World War II when we were up against the Japanese? Do you think anybody spoke out against the concentration camps that we had on our own soil, where
no,
we
but
imprisoned our own
that's
citizens?
the point that I'm trying to
Because what I'm
make.
saying is,
that
yeah, they have
people
free
should have
speech,
been
but
people should have
yeah.
been talking about it
And
been,
guess what happened
been
to those
speaking
that
out
did?
against it.
Guess what happened to those that did? The majority either beat their butts, burned their homes, or accused them of being commie traitors.
But what you're saying, but what you guys are saying is that the majority should be allowed to control free
I'm not
speech.
saying the majority should. I'm saying the majority does.
It's
Yeah.
it's not a should, it's a does. That
Like it
But
inevitably
what,
happens.
but what I'm saying is by freeing up free speech to everybody, to every different idea, to everything that could ever possibly be said, you're eliminating the idea of the majority control, which is what I want. Because you cannot decide in the next 40 years what the majority believes.
You want the majority control.
No, you
That's
shouldn't.
because guess
The
what?
problem
The
with-
majority does what's best for the majority.
it's
How
like
can
it's
you
humanism.
guarantee that?
Okay.
Okay, let me give you an example. In the Rwandan genocide, the government and the majority decided that any free speech against the genocide, the people speaking out against the genocide weren't allowed to have free speech. They would be killed. They would be forced off of radio stations, off of television. They weren't allowed to speak out against the genocide because the majority decided that's what we needed in our society, this genocide. You cannot give the power of free speech, the control of free speech over to the majority because it eventually will screw you.
I feel like if you remove the censorship, right? The majority is still going to be there. And what will happen is it won't be the government controlling the censorship, it'll be the majority controlling the censorship. And that can go one of two ways. It can either work out fine, like you said, or it can turn into a more of the citizens taking it into their own hands. They're tracking down people with these bad ideas, they're getting rid of them.
There should not be a litmus test on free speech because free speech is inherently that, free. So by giving the power to decide what should be talked about and what should be not is by definition not free speech.
Okay, I think what Grant was trying to get at was, or at least in my opinion, if you have these opinions, that's okay, but the opinion that you have is that this group of people, just because of their skin color or their race or religion, that means that they're bad. We should get rid of these people. Like, you're
compound you with
harming
this,
those
right?
people, you know what I mean?
So you're saying because you want free
Okay,
hold up, let me say my say. All right, you're saying free speech, right, should include hate speech, but you realize that that speech is the sole goal to strip away rights and free speech from a group.
Yeah.
Right, so isn't that a bit counterintuitive?
But no, it's not counterintuitive, because by stripping away the rights to free speech for those same for the groups that are hating on others, you're just doing the same thing, just to another group.
I would rather persecute racists than someone like that's persecution
and
for a reason. I'm behind that.
My
I'm
point
behind
is,
not
I'm not
letting people who are neo-Nazis. And
But
have
here's the thing.
Nazi tattoos
My
on their
argument
back
is clean of all persecution. My argument does not have the right to say what should be persecuted and what not. My argument is saying we should let everybody decide. We should let everybody say whatever they can say.
My argument
because
says we should stand up for the minorities
Yeah,
that
so
can't stand up for
what
themselves.
happens if you allow free speech completely and enough people talk like neo-Nazis, they form together, and then they go on a killing spree?
Hitler had
of all
free
these
speech when he
people-
made speeches at the
Right.
Hofbräuhausen.
So because you allowed free hate speech, then all of these people have died because you let these people say that these people are lesser and these people
And don't tell me
shouldn't
that hate speech can't
be
rally
allowed
up a
to
group.
live.
'Cause
Oh,
that's
no,
exactly
I'm
what
not.
happens.
I'm not arguing against what you wanted to say. Something?
I just wanted to interject, sort of saying something along the lines of what Kizzy said. I am a very firm believer in the fact it's just sort of part of human psychology that I believe if you say something enough times with enough consonants, people will start to believe it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's wrong.
Let me make this clear to you guys, okay? I'm talking about free speech on the public square. I'm talking about free speech out in the park. I'm talking about free speech in the middle of the road. I'm not talking about speech on these news media
Okay.
outlets, because the fact of the matter is that the speech spoken on these networks are not free speech inherently, because what decides the speech on these networks is not freedom.
All right, time out,
It's
time out.
it's
Let's-
capitalism.
I agree
it's
with
the
you.
ta-
I
it's the
agree with you.
consumer.
Let's not get into this whole the networks control the media. All right, look, that's a rabbit hole that we're not going to go down today. But I agree with you that every single news
We
network
don't
there
have
has a
time for
bias
that right now.
and an agenda.
We don't have time
I'm
for
not
that.
arguing with
So,
that at all.
what I'm trying to say is that
So you think that regular Joe Schmo on the street should be able to say whatever
Yeah,
the heck
yeah.
he wants, but he can't get on TV and say that?
I'm not saying, but because no, what I'm saying is I don't care if he gets on TV, but that's the choice of the company and the news organization.
Let me say it
to
like this.
decide
All
that.
right, so for example,
This is a great segue
another thing
what
to
I
weigh in
wanted
on free
to talk
speech.
about.
If you throw a snowball at someone, I know, give me a sec, and a person of color, let's say, you throw a snowball at them, that's a misdemeanor. You yell the N-word whilst doing it, so that's a felony.
Don't
That's
you
because of
think-
speech, though.
don't
Do you
you
not
think-
think that the free speech should allow that to still be a misdemeanor? Well, then why do we consider it a felony? Because it's a hate crime. And so if we're
I
going to
think-
criminalize hate, then we should also not allow the speech of it either.
But
I'm
here's,
just
here's,
preaching
but here's
not
the thing:
hate.
the idea of free speech means that you can't criminalize hate. That's inherently the truth, unless it's a physical act against the person for hating that person's race or identity or whatever it is. Free speech doesn't get into hate
So
crimes.
what if
It's just
you
a
are
preference.
you're not physically attacking someone at the time, but you're speaking saying this group is far less superior than us. I think they should die.
I don't have a problem with that.
Well, here's
You're
what I'm saying.
threatening them.
Here's what I'm saying. So you say freedom of speech. So this is back to my snowball argument. I have the freedom of speech to say whatever I want. And what does it matter what I'm saying whilst I do an action? What does it change it from a misdemeanor offense into a felony?
Oh, nothing. I'm saying that you should get rid of the felony. That
So
you
you're
should
saying-
get rid of it. Because here's the thing. A hate crime can still be prosecuted as long as it's a hate crime, a physical action against that person for hating them. Or
Okay.
for hating that group of people, or for hating their identity. I'm not saying get rid of hate crimes. I'm saying get rid of hate crimes when it's talking about words. Because we
No.
shouldn't be allowed we shouldn't have an idol standing inside of the minds of all of us as a society, deciding what and what not to say.
We don't have one person. That's the whole thing back to the majority deciding. It's not one person.
But I don't think the majority should decide. I do not think the majority should decide at all. I don't think anybody
But
should decide what is
I think
free
the
speech.
biggest issue with a lot of things is who's going to be the judge of what and where. Because we have a lot of good ideas. It's the execution of which that causes the problem.
And exactly, that's my point. if you have no control over speech, if you're doing exactly what I'm saying, which is get rid of everything that is controlling free speech, you don't need the person to decide it. In your world, in your guys' world, you would need somebody to decide what is right and what is wrong. And you can never guarantee that what will be decided as free speech will be good for the country, will be good for the world, would be good for human beings in general.
You know what? I do have to agree with you on that, because what you define as good is what your society that you've
Right.
raised in has been defined as good.
That's like
Generally.
So
that's-
for us, oh yeah, we're a first world country. We have a good moral compass. Yeah, fair enough. But all right, yeah, I agree with you on that.
All right.
There is an extent to that, which I guess is what leads this whole thing back to the conclusion, because we've been on free speech for a good minute. It's about political correctness here.
Yeah. So
And while
let's
it's not necessary, it does help.
Well, that's a good stopping point. Thanks for listening to Think Tank. We'll see you next week. Bye.